And what does he do? He says things that are called alilas devarim. He basically says things about her that are untrue. Right? He sets forth these statements that are unkind and unwarranted. And what do they do? The Torah says they punish him. Okay, they chastise him. Okay, and the rabbis say in this drasha over here, he says, what does he complain about? Because he was saying things that weren't true about her, right? He says that she was basically what he was challenging is whether or not the young woman was chaste before she got married to him, and he made up a story because he felt that she was not, but it wasn't true. And so the rabbis say that since he has gone ahead and violated another precept, he was lo selech rachel, right, not being a talebearer, he gets a further punishment. So the Chafetz Chaim says that punishment is he pays 100 silver because he has said an evil name or brought out an evil name, Yotzi Shem Ra, on a young unmarried girl, virgin girl in Israel. Okay, that's also chapter 22. So the Gemara in Erechim, all right, this is our favorite Gemara over here on Daf Tesvav. Okay, it says the following: that someone who says something bad about somebody else, it's worse for them than the person who did the bad thing. Okay, because on a person who committed grievous sins such as rape or he elicited sexual contact which was not forced, they don't have to pay this money. Okay, he only pays half that. Okay, he also doesn't get lashes. Lashes are assessed by the court. No, if you are motzi shem ra, if you say something false and spread it amongst everybody, you get the 100 and you get the lashes. Okay? You could even say further that it's similar to a verse in the prophet Amos. This is in Amos chapter 4, verse 13. He says, here we have before you the one who created the mountains and brought forth the wind, and he relates to a person what he has says. Meaning that a person, when he really considers every so often about the things that he does, he doesn't really understand the implications of what he's doing. But the things that he says, he really doesn't care. He doesn't. He cares even less, because if a person cared about what they themselves were doing, especially what they were doing to others, then they would refrain and restrain. They would refrain from doing it and restrain themselves from saying things. So how terrible is the level of distraught and destruction that can come through a simple statement? Because you see clearly that he has nothing here with any validity whatsoever, and it does a significant amount of damage. But that's not really how it all works, as we see. That the damage does come from heaven, based on what a person has said, more so than what a person has done. And that's why it says in that verse that he will relate to a person what is his speech, which is to say that he's going to, at the time of judgment, inflict and assess a judgment, meaning Hashem will do this, and will demonstrate to him the gravity of it. This is further evidenced in a verse in Tehillim, in Tehillah number 50, number 21, where he says, I will reproach you and I will set you straight before your eyes. What exactly you've done wrong with your speech. And it's not that the verse is saying, I'm going to tell you what you said. I'm going to say what you've spoken about. Okay? There's a difference between a statement and how you talk. When I'm talking about how you talk, I'm trying to say even the most basic aspects of your conversation, the most simple of conversations, which is what the rabbis are stressing in another Gemara. This Gemara is in Chagiga, it's on 5a, that even the simplest, most basic conversations between a husband and wife will be related to him, to a person, at the time of ultimate judgment. And not one simple thing that you've ever uttered will ever be lost and will never have been recorded. Okay? All those things are recorded and related before you. Why? Because we find by Koheles in the 10th chapter there, verse 20, because even the bird will take what it hears and transfer it all over the place. Okay? That's what it does. And the bird referred to there is really an angel. And that angel is the angel Gabriel, which is to say that he's going to announce at the time of your judgment all the different things that were done in this world. And it further says that the bird will transfer the sound that you've uttered, right? The thing that you've said. This activity is similar to what we see in nature itself, that everything that is said that has a sound to it, and every letter attaches to that sound, and when you say it, it transfers through the air, and not a single letter that you've uttered is lost in that air transfer. And so therefore, when you speak, the voice itself holds the place of all the letters that you've uttered and puts them in his ear. And we see a similar statement in the Gemara in Bava Metzia on page 58b. Rabbi Yochanan quotes Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai in the following way, which is, Onas Devarim, making hurtful statements, is worse than doing damages with money. Okay, I can hurt you with words, I can hurt you with money. So even though I can hurt you with money is something that I do, and hurting you with words is something that I say, this is exactly what the Torah warns us about, which is to be afraid of God. It says it by the prohibition of Onas Devarim. It says that in Vayikra, in chapter 25, verse 17. Okay, and then they say, well, is this not the only place where it says that you should be afraid of God? So Rabbi Elazar responds to that, and he says that what is being afraid personally and what is being afraid for your stuff. Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachmani says also that one I can take back, I mean I can transfer the money, no problem, but the words, they're already out there. And it's even worse if a person causes him this type of anguish until he basically humiliates him, makes his face turn completely white in humiliation. The sin he's brought upon himself is greater than he can bear. Because we say further that all who cause great humiliation to their friend is if he has killed him. It's a terrible thing to do. So you see over here, that's how bad Motzi Shemra is. And that's why the penalty there is assessed more heavily. Okay, another thing in the Parsha. The Parsha, it says here that one should have a small shovel with them, amongst all of their other utensils. Why do you need a small shovel? So Bar Kapara in the Gemara in Ksubis is quoted as saying the following. This is on 5a. Why do you need to have this little shovel with you? It doesn't mean to have it with you with your tools. If you need something there for your ears. Then if you hear something and it sounds like it's not a proper thing to hear, one should take his finger and stick it into his ear. Meaning, when you realize that this person wants this statement to be heard, or you don't want to hear from him anymore. And Rabbi Elazar echoes this statement by saying the following, why were the fingers of the person slanted downward like a peg? Yeah, a peg, we want to plant it in the ground. It's when you peg it into the ground, it's slanted so it easily goes into the dirt. Because this way, if you hear something inappropriate, you can put your finger in your ear. Rabbi Yishmael taught, the school of Rabbi Yishmael taught in a brisa, why is the entire ear made of a stiff material, but the end of it is soft? Why is it soft? Because if you hear something bad, you push it in, so you shouldn't hear it. And so too, the Chofetz Chaim adds, he says, because putting your finger in there isn't enough. Shoving this thing is better. Okay? So that's what they're arguing about. And so therefore, a person should, and therefore the rabbis taught, a person should not listen to useless things. Okay? Because sometimes you'll be burned by those simple things. Okay? Meaning you'll feel the burn. Okay. Another thing that it says in the parsha is to be careful of the affliction of tsaras, to guard yourself from teaching people that they are a tsaras. Okay, so that it's difficult to translate into English, but that's what we mean. Is that one should be very careful to teach people about these laws, seek those laws from the Kohanim. And then it finishes off with, and remember what happened to Miriam on your way out of Egypt. And this is towards the end of the Parsha in chapter 24, verses 8 and 9. The Sifri says, remember what Hashem did to Miriam on the way, which was something that I just sort of keep at the heart. All right? No, he says, you should be careful by the affliction of tsaras, of this form of skin disease. Which is to say, you need to guard the whole body. All right. So how do I do that? How do I remember something or make a commemoration of it? You have to recite it from your mouth and then explain it. Because when it says to stay away far from the affliction of tsaras, right? It's not only that I should stay away from it, but also I need to guard myself from it. So I have to do two things: stay away and do an action of guarding. Everything possible that I could do, and everything that needs to be done, I ask the Kohanim for it. And so when we say to remember what he did to Miriam, we should make mention of that regularly. And the Ramban brings us in the commentary there. Meaning it's one of those things that the Ramban talks about that should be mentioned every day. And he says further that it actually is a mitzvah to make mention of it, just like we say by making mention of Shabbos, okay, which we mention all the way back in chapter 20 of Shemos. And it also says to remember the day you left Egypt, right? We say that in chapter 13 of Shemos. All right, we have to do something. So we're saying that this is a command. Do something to make a remembrance. So remember the punishment that was done by Hashem to Miriam for saying something against against Moshe, even though she was a righteous prophet herself. It was something that was said only against her brother, but nonetheless she had to take punishment for it. And even though she totally loved him, and she only was speaking, out of caring for him, and it was not appropriate, and she recognized that, and it was something she said to him and not in front of other people. And so, nonetheless, all the good deeds that she didn't help her in this situation. Okay? And that's what the Midrash says over there. And that, friends, brings us to the end of Parshas Teitzei. So we'll now do Parshas Ki Savo. This is also kind of short. So there's something interesting about Parshas Ki Savo, which is that all of the Parshas that are mentioned above, they all mention the prohibition of Lashon Hara. There's a special blessing mentioned in this Parsha for one who guards himself from saying Lashon Hara. Okay? So that's an interesting thing, because in most situations, it mentions a statement about someone being cursed. Okay, and it's mentioned here a whole bunch of them in chapter 27 of Devarim. Okay, and so you see that there are people who are standing to curse, right? Har Gerizim and Har Eval, to do the blessing. So amongst the 11 different curses that are uttered at that time, there is a blessing uttered for one who is careful against saying bad things about others. Okay, and so therefore, it's announced very publicly that the blessing for guarding yourself against saying bad things is announced very prominently, and everyone answers amen to that. And then we say in the curses later on in verse 24, cursed be the one who strikes his friend in secret, which is actually not an actual strike. It's talking about speaking Lashon Hara, and the Sifri makes that point. And so all the Jewish people answer amen to that. And that's why we should be so careful about this one, because we see that it has aspects of it that exude blessing, and certain aspects of it that attract significant punishment and penalty. And then we say that Hashem, our God, is going to be the one in charge of us. He's given us these rules, and we should follow them and to guard them. Okay, and that's brought down in verse 16 and 17. And from this verse, we learn the high levels that are expected to be attained by following in these moral guidelines by the Holy One, blessed be He. In order for us to learn how to be kind and loving and so on and so forth, similar to that. And so the Torah enumerates all of the different paths that are needed in order to keep these mitzvos properly. Okay? Which tells us that attaining this commitment level is the highest level that we can attain. So it's similar, for example, when we say in the Gemara Brachos the following. Okay, when talking about praising the land of Israel, the verse says what? This is back in Devarim 8:8. Said it's a land of wheat and barley, right? And everything that is listed first means that that's how much more beloved it is for those things. And so therefore, in a similar way, we need to be strong with this thing to see how important the blessings are in terms of attaining those blessings. Okay, and so therefore we see furthermore from this chapter and from this parsha how far we need to stay away from the prohibition of Lashon Hara, because it's in being consistent with the pathways set up for us by the Holy One, blessed be He. We should try to make sure that we attain the blessing, which is similar to the blessing of the Jewish people, but in contrast to what Achan gets. If you remember the story of Achan, so he's quoting here the Gemara in Sanhedrin Mem Gimel, Sanhedrin 43. Okay, and it says the following story. So what did Achan do? So Achan, in the second chapter of Joshua, that there was a ban against taking any. There was a ban against privateering. You couldn't seize the spoils of the conquests in the first place, which was Yericho. But Achan does it anyway. Okay. And there was punishments as a result, and Yehoshua begs for forgiveness before the Aron. And then Hashem says back to Yehoshua, why are you prostrating yourself? Why are you doing that? There are those who have done wrong. So you need to get rid of the ones who have done wrong and address them, and not address yourself. And this happens further on in chapter 7. Okay? Actually, I think the citation that's here in the book was backwards. It should be Yehoshua 6 and Yehoshua 7. I said 2. It said 2 over here. It should be chapter 2 is not talking about that. Chapter 6 and 7 is where we talk about Yericho. And with stealing these things, when we told him not to, he has brought terrible things upon himself. So what he was telling to Hoshua was, the one who did wrong called to him, okay, and let him take responsibility for it.
Rockville person.
And let him be the one who takes the act as responsibility for it. Okay. And so, are you basically, Hashem says to him, "Are you the one who has spoken out against somebody? Are you the one who has slandered the Jewish people? Why would you take responsibility for this? Don't take responsibility for Achan. Okay, get rid of the things that we told you not to keep, and nonetheless, even though he was told to do a whole bunch of things, he was told to speak to directly find Achan and address him directly, and cast lots, and find him out. Okay." And they were meant to do it, but not in a way in which they were going to basically say it, but they were going to delineate it through the lots. Okay? And so therefore, since the Holy One, blessed be He, created us in His image, like it says in the Torah, we should therefore try to emulate our Creator as many ways as possible. And because of the greatness of this character trait, which is the main thing to focus on in the service of Hashem, blessed be He, the Torah therefore spells out the following way: walk in His ways on all the days of your life, right? Which is back in chapter 19, verse 9, which is that it's not enough to simply say, "Hey, I could be a good guy," right? It's nice to be a good guy. I'd be a nice guy, a good guy, right? I could just be that. Right? I could be nice. I could be kind. I need to do more than that. Okay? You have to be so careful that not only that I'm a good guy, but also that you attach yourself to the holiness part of this as well, what it means to follow His ways. And in all other types of commandments, you have to guard yourself from violating those as well. But we don't have to be specific about each one. It's the level of general conduct that we're addressing. So what we're saying is that the things that are not obvious to us, the nistaros, which he says over here, quoting Devarim 29, are not our problem. The things that we know about are the things that we can address appropriately. And so we see from here that everything that is done in seeing all these different parts of the Torah that talk about these issues of interpersonal issues and the negative conduct, and warns us against those negative conduct and keeps us away from the prohibitions, and so many dozens of verses that are similar to these that are written in the prophets and in the last section of the Ksuvim, in Nach itself, that basically make a person not want to. It makes it what is it? Makes it unpleasant. It makes it almost it's just you can't stomach it. These types of behaviors for someone who is just wantonly destructive with their mouth for all types of things that they want to say. And so praiseworthy is the person that takes their time to focus on the honor of the Torah and what Hashem wants us to do, and be careful to not violate anything about it. And may His portion be our portion, and may his existence be shared with our existence as well. And so with that, we conclude all of our investigations into the Parshios. There's still a few more sections over here. Okay, so we'll talk more about different behavior behavior patterns and how to fix certain things. We'll talk about if you've gone wrong, how to fix it, how to purify your thought, and a few other chapters are left here to think about, and also review some of the things that we talked about, making sure you make time to learn Torah, and also to have some fear of Hashem and honor Hashem. So those are the last few chapters that we'll get into. We'll probably have another class or two on it. Have to see how much we can kind of cram into the classes. I don't want to overwhelm you. But we'll probably cover a few of those topics next time. Thank you for joining. With this, we conclude our discussion of the Parshios, and we'll review a few final topics before we go into the epilogue. Thank you for joining. We'll see you next time.